Lead is much used as a roofing material for church towers in Devon, and I've been surprised by the longevity of some. This is the earliest dated example I've seen, 1775, almost 250 years old and still in good order. Graffiti may also be found on rainwater systems, such as here on this lead downpipe. Lead is one of the softest and most malleable metals and easily marked. Here I'm using a sharpened nail to inscribe a line. Marking lead with a stylus would seem the most obvious method, and indeed we do see it, as here with this shoe outline. But there is a different marking technique that dominates, at least from the late 17th century to the mid-20th century, and that's so-called wriggle work. Here we see both inscribed lines and wriggle work on the same section of roof over a turret stair. This lead has clearly been reused from an earlier section of the main roof. It even has Adolf Hitler as a visitor, or, more likely, a prankster using the tower on firewatch duty during the Second World War. What this section of roof flashing also shows are parts of two motifs which we commonly find on lead roofs, that's to say, shoe and glove outlines. This is an elaborate glove from the same roof flashing. Scribed on top of the glove is a name and date, C. Bidgood, 1672. This is the earliest dated wrigglework graffiti so far found in Devon. Two examples of obvious wrigglework, especially the one on the top. Yet more examples, clear wriggling at the top, but below it, what appears much more like individual chevron shapes, but they're all wriggle no doubt. This is an animation of how wrigglework might be achieved. Shallow curved blade is pushed into the lead, one side becomes a pivot, and the opposite side is advanced and pressed in. The other side then becomes a pivot, and the advance continued. Line, pivot, and so on. Firstly, using a shallow curved wood carving gouge, which I've blunted as I don't want to pierce the lead. Here, I'm making wide strides in my wriggle walk, just as I've described in the little animation. When I first saw wrigglework, I was convinced it had been made with a wheeled embossing tool, but closer examination showed too many variations to allow for this. Next, I'm using a carving gouge with a more curved profile and making the same walk. The next tool is a V-shaped gouge in an attempt to replicate the chevron-like wriggle. It really doesn't work. Two straight sides will not wriggle. The fourth line uses a flat screwdriver, a tool which would be more easily found, no doubt. But my technique here is removing lead. Next, a slightly smaller screwdriver, but using an exaggerated rocking action this time. This removes less lead. Finally, a round-bladed knife to try to replicate the chevron-like marks, pressing right and left while rocking backwards and forwards with a small push. This advance is made possible by the curved blade. So what did we achieve? The first line, with the shallow curved gouge, is something like the marks we find. The second line, with the more rounded profile, hasn't really worked. The third line using a V-shaped gouge is a complete failure. Next, the first of the flat screwdrivers, then another smaller screwdriver. Finally, the round-bladed knife. None of these convincingly replicate the marks we find on lead. And yet, there is much consistency in the historic graffiti. What tools were being used, and where did the skills come from?